Okay, great. Thanks so much, Blockchain Summit LATAM, for hosting this amazing panel. I'm really happy to be here with Stephen Young, the founder and CEO of NFTfi, a platform for collateralizing NFTs in exchange for crypto loans. So very excited to talk about this new NFT plus DeFi movement that is rising. And I'm Camila Russo, the founder and chiefess of the Defiant, a content platform focusing on decentralized finance. So if you haven't, subscribe to our newsletter and our YouTube channel. Hi, Stephen. Thanks so much for joining this panel. Excited to chat.
Hi, Camilla. Thanks for having me. Excited to chat to you about NFTfi and like NFT collateralized loans.
Yeah. So first, just like I want to get your quick background and what led you to start this project.
Sure. So I've been building software products for almost 20 years now. So originally in the finance space, but my original background was I was an artist, but also a computer programmer, and then had to decide between becoming a starving artist or a computer programmer who can pay the bills. So decided to do the way that paid. But I've always been kind of painting and doing art in the background. I've been doing some generative art over the years too. I'm originally from South Africa, and in 2016 I did a calculation and figured out that I was earning more. My first job I was working in London, and in 2016 I worked out that I was earning more in my first job than I was in my current job because of the drop in the purchasing power of the rand. So they got very interested in crypto very quickly as a way to kind of escape the kind of spiraling currency in the local country there. So then in 2017, 2018, I started to go full-time into crypto, was mostly on the exchange and trading side, but then left there. And in late 2019, I was having a conversation with one of my best friends, Mads, and he's been a very early crypto kitty and NFT collector since 2017, really. And we were talking about the NFT markets and Ethereum and so on. And he was saying that they were looking for ways to do loans, essentially. So there was a whole bunch of them. They had a spreadsheet. They were lending money to each other. Keeping track of who owed what to who on the actual spreadsheet. And then he sent that to me and he said, well, like, can we do this as a smart contract? And basically that's where we started.
Wow. Okay. So people were already lending out their NFTs, but keeping track of everything in just like a spreadsheet.
Yeah, so it was a group of guys who'd all been like trading together for a long time. A lot of the names you'd probably like recognize now as like the big NFT influencers. I won't dox them in public today, but yeah, so they knew each other. So they'd been kind of friends for 2 or 3 years, and they'd sometimes need liquidity for different projects. So they would just kind of in a friendly way keep track of who owed who what, which assets they used as collateral. And then just kind of on a friendly way between friends do it. And then we essentially wanted to figure out like, how do you expand that outside of, like a trust group, which is, obviously what blockchains are made for. So we really just took almost exactly what was in that spreadsheet and then designed a smart contract system that would work that way.
Oh, cool. Okay. So the basics of it, is it this? The reason to do this is basically you have an NFT collection and you don't want to sell it, but you need liquidity to trade more crypto, to, I don't know, potentially buy stuff with crypto. So the way to get that liquidity without having to cash out on your NFTs is lending those NFTs in exchange for crypto, and then paying an interest rate to whoever is lending you that crypto and holding your NFT.
Yes, that's correct. So different use cases, but so for some people, they just like being liquid. With these massive rises in prices, a lot of our users, like were students and they've been buying, punks when they were still, less than 1 Ether. All of a sudden, they're worth a significant amount of money, and it represents quite a large portion of their actual capital and their wealth. So some of them, what they will just do is they take out a loan, and then just so that they're liquid, so they can do other stuff. So sometimes they'll be flipping, so they'll see flipping opportunities. Other people will put that money in a yield farm, and then earn more than they pay in interest. Other people they know a big drop is coming and they want to get in on the drop. So those are kind of the main reasons. And one clarification there is the other person doesn't ever hold your NFT. The NFT goes into our smart contract to be held as escrow. So in that way, you're guaranteed that if you repay, you will absolutely 100% get back your NFT. And at the same time, the lender is also guaranteed that if you don't repay, we will transfer the NFT back into their account.
Okay, got it. What kind of rates are there for these loans? Like, what are people paying?
It depends quite a lot on the actual projects. So the kind of real blue chip established projects, things like CryptoPunks, Autoglyphs, Bored Ape Yacht Clubs are also starting to kind of fall into that territory. Art Blocks is similar. For those projects, you're probably seeing 18 to 25% annual percentage rates. For the more risky projects, and especially the one-on-one art, which you're not always guaranteed to like very easily find a secondary market for, you can see up to 60 to 80% APR. So it depends. And then also shorter term loans, often people need them in a hurry. So if they just need something for 7 days, often that's because, they made a trade somewhere else on margin and they need quick liquidity to be able to close their positions. For them, you'll also see higher APR. So, up 80 to 120 sometimes. But for blue chip assets over a longer period, like 20 to 40%, I think is reasonable.
Okay, so that means they're pretty high rates, but on the flip side, it means that it's also an opportunity for people who have crypto assets, who have ETH, to gain a very decent interest on their crypto as well.
Exactly. And especially so, and then the other reason people act as lenders is often they'll be offering loans on assets that they want anyway. So they're almost hoping that the person doesn't repay. So you'll see people giving quite high loan to value ratios at quite attractive APR on these kind of high value assets. Because, so typically you see if an asset is worth 20 Ether, you'll probably get a loan of around 10 Ether on it. But you can imagine, with CryptoPunks the way they've been, you could quite easily sell that for 75% or 80% of the actual value then. So a default is normally more profitable than like actually getting a loan repaid. And secondly, a lot of these assets are assets that don't trade all that often, that people tend to want to hold on to, but they need some liquidity. So you kind of get a chance at getting something that you probably normally wouldn't get an opportunity to buy.
That's really interesting. So on a liquidation event, like how are those prices tracked? I guess like that would be a challenge for like NFT loans, because you don't, like, the market isn't as liquid as with regular crypto. So you need to kind of you need a very good oracle, right, to be tracking kind of what the floor price is for all of these assets held under collateral.
Well, so that's why we don't track the prices. So so the model we have, it's actually the common in the art world. It's like a no recourse loan. And the way that it works is that you essentially agree with the lender a specific time period and a specific repayment amount. And then you've got that time period to repay. If in the meantime the market crashes, it's up to you to decide if you want to repay. So we don't actually keep track of the prices. We don't set a price. There's no auto liquidations. The loan is for a specific period and a specific repayment amount. And I think that's actually quite important for the NFT market, because a lot of people, they don't want to accidentally get liquidated because something happened in the market. Like, people have this emotional attachment to these NFT pieces that they own. So, so I know at least of one user who often takes out loans and repays them the same day. But he'll take out a 30-day loan, because what he's going to be doing is going to go do a trade on margin. And if the trade doesn't go his way, he wants 30 days to be able to find the money to be able to get his NFT back. So he's willing to pay all of that extra cost, just so that there's not a chance that he accidentally loses his assets. So so that's how we work. We don't rely on pricing. I think there's lots of projects working on this problem of NFT oracles and NFT automatic pricing. I think that's quite difficult problem to solve. I think you can do it for floor assets, but most of the time our loans actually aren't for floor assets. They're for kind of the high. Most of the volume comes from the rarer items in the more valuable products.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so each loan has its own specific terms, and the lender and borrower agree on those terms. So there is the duration of the loan, the rate, the price of the collateral, the interest rate, and I guess how when it's paid, are people just paying interest every month or every week, and while others are just paying all the interest at the maturity of the loan, and all of that is just agreed between lender and borrower?
Yes. So the way that it would work is, say you've got a Bored Ape you want to get a loan on. You come to our website and then you just sign a message saying that you're willing to use that ape as collateral. So it doesn't cost you anything. So I think that's quite important, that it doesn't cost you anything to list something. And then multiple lenders can bid. And so you should get multiple offers on that. So when you list it, you can say, well, I'm looking for a loan for 15 Ether and I want it for 30 days. And then, so I can then go on and say, okay, well, I'll give you 28 Ether over 30 days and I want 29 Ether back. But then other people can also make you an offer, and then you pick whichever one is the most attractive to you. And then at the moment, all of our loans are paid in full right at the end. So no repayments, because as soon as you start doing repayments, it starts getting a little bit more complicated with liquidation. So if the way the loans work right now is either you pay everything or I get the NFT. Whereas as soon as you start doing repayments, then it's okay, well, I've repaid some, how do we liquidate that NFT? So we are working on amortized loans over longer periods. But for that, you'd need a liquidation mechanism. And at the moment, what we're planning on doing is doing an auction mechanism. But that's not live at this stage. So all the current loans are fixed period. You either repay everything in full at the end, or the lender gets your NFT.
Okay, yeah, that kind of simplifies things. And you were saying that the price of these loans is what's the loan to collateral ratio usually for these? I mean, you're for blue chips.
Yeah. So usually around 50%. But then you'll see, especially on the blue chips, often that goes higher, and that's normally when the lender is hoping that you'll default. Because they want that asset.
That's so interesting. Okay, how much volume are you seeing? How much demand is there for something like this?
Yeah, so we started in June last year. So you can imagine the market wasn't anything like it is today. And it kind of started relatively slowly. And we've kind of, since in the last 4 to 5 months, we've seen a huge increase. So in total, we've done just over $10 million in loans, of which 3.7 was last month. The month before that was 2 million. We're already on 1.5 million this month. So we're looking probably high fours, maybe 5 million in volume this month. So
Wow.
it's picking up. At the moment, our average loan size is $25,000. So relatively high value assets, but it's picking up, kind of growing between 70 and 200% a month at the moment in terms of volume.
And how many users are there?
So we've got about 2,500 people who've listed and made offers, but about 400 people have taken out loans, and just less than that have actually made the loan. So we'll see a lot of it is the same, is people coming back and back. So once people have done one loan, you've seen them kind of using it over and over again. So it's relatively high volumes from quite a small number of users still. I think especially now in the last few months, a lot of the people who own NFTs are actually quite new to the space. So I think it takes a little bit of time for people to go from getting some ether and then buying their first NFT to then starting to think about them as assets that you can actually make productive, and that you don't have to sell them if you need some liquidity.
So interesting. Of that 10 million in volume, how much of it has been paid, and how much was liquidated?
Yeah, so we're getting 19% default rate at the moment. So more than 80% of the loans get repaid. It depends a little bit on the markets. So, when the prices just keep going up, then obviously all the loans get repaid. But you'll see more defaults if there's a huge drop on either the NFT market or if Ethereum shoots up really quickly. And if you take out an Ethereum loan and then the price of Ethereum doubles or triples in the time of the loan, then you'll see a few more defaults. The DAI stablecoin based loans are a little bit higher repayment rates because you don't have both the NFT prices and the Ethereum price fluctuating. So it's a little bit more stable.
Got it. Very cool. So in the long term, like for NFT lending, would you see this evolving into something that's because I'm trying to like make parallels with the traditional finance. And so in traditional finance, you have different models of asset-backed lending. And on one extreme is like the safest kind of asset-backed loans, which is kind of like a home equity loan. And then there's like a pawn shop. So for like NFTs, where do you see this evolving to? Like, will it be just like very risky asset-backed loans, or do you see it like going into just like very high quality credit?
I think we can so early in NFTs that we can still talk about NFTs as if they're one thing. And if you think about in the real world, so you get fungible things and non-fungible things. And in the real world, the fungible things are money and stocks and commodities, basically. And everything else is non-fungible. And in crypto, we're so used to that we started with fungible things first, that we forget that most things aren't fungible. And an NFT really is just a unique digital thing, right? And then, so that could literally be anything. So the design space is almost infinite in NFTs. And I think this year is probably the last time that we're going to we will be able to be speaking about NFTs as a thing on its own. So we've got art, and then we've got generative art, and then I think we'll have real estate NFTs, and music rights are going to start becoming a like an asset class on its own. IP with IP royalty flows are going to become a thing on its own. So I think what you're going to see is the market splitting into subcategories, and I think some of them are going to be pawn shop like. So, there's always going to be the equivalent of the next profile picture craze, where there's a million different projects all coming at the same time. And then on the other hand, on the other end of that spectrum, if it's a Madonna NFT representing rights to her music royalties, or like a Beatles NFT, like those are going to be pretty blue chip. So I think it's going to split. I don't think you can put it into a single bucket. And that's part of, so the way we design the protocol is that it's It's more of like an NFT agreement protocol, and we're doing loans first, but we can add more and more types of agreements going into the future. So, in these kind of yield-bearing NFTs, you can imagine a loan where you take out the loan and the loan is actually paid off by the NFT itself with the royalties it's receiving. So you can take out the loan and it'll kind of pay itself back, and then you can pull some more out and it'll pay itself back. So, there's going to be lots of the design space is just super exciting. So it's part of the reason I'm excited to be in the NFT space so early.
Yeah, very cool. For NFTfi, what's the business model? Do you get a percentage of the loan that's paid back? How does it work?
Yeah, so we take a percentage of the interest earned on the actual loan, and if there's a default, we don't take anything. So essentially, if somebody's making money on the transaction, we take a small percentage, 5% of the interest, and if there's a default, we don't take anything.
Okay. With how things are evolving in the space, it's like I have to ask. What's your road or plan to decentralize, if any? Like, will you have a token? Will this become a DAO?
Yeah, so I think decentralization is important. At the same time, I also think when do you decentralize and who do you give ownership to is also important. So, for us, it's important to get enough people actually using the platform so we know how to distribute tokens. But yes, we will eventually move to a DAO structure. So one of the things we do on our platform is that you can't get a loan on any asset because it's too risky, right? Anybody can deploy a contract that looks like a punk, and then people lose their money. So we have to approve NFT contracts before they can be used as collateral on our platform. So that'll be one of the first things that we're going to hand over to the community to manage. So we shouldn't really be the ones who are gatekeeping what projects you can use as collateral. The community should be able to vote to add and remove projects from the platform. So yes, we will eventually decentralize. We just want to make sure that we do it at the right time, and we don't really want to have, you often see this where people release a token and then there's the number go up crowd comes in and everybody is just worried, like when moon. And I don't think that that's a healthy way to kind of grow a decentralized community. You really want to make sure that the people actually using these platforms and are the people who then take on ownership of the platform. So that's very important for us to get right.
Totally. And then I want to get your thoughts on NFT DeFi more broadly. Like, how else do you see NFTs integrating with decentralized finance?
Yeah, so I think where there's value, there's finance, right? So as there's more money in these NFTs, there's going to be more needs for them. I think what a lot of DeFi projects are doing right now that are trying to get into the NFT space is they're kind of almost trying to take the N out of the NFT, right? So they're just trying to make the non-fungible tokens fungible. And I think sometimes it's useful, especially for floor assets. But I do also think that there is just something inherently different about like the non-fungibility of tokens, like in NFTs. And I do think there's going to be more and more financial services that are required to be kind of used in these things like insurance, rentals, hedging. Like I think there's a huge space. And I think there's going to be some overlap into the traditional DeFi universe, but I also think there's going to be like a whole new decentralized finance universe specifically geared towards non-fungible products, as opposed to trying to make non-fungible tokens fit into the existing fungible token decentralized infrastructure.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So you're foreseeing this NFT DeFi space evolving so that there are more financial services catering specifically to NFTs. Like insurance against your NFTs and so on.
Yeah, and hedging and so on.
Got it. No, that makes a lot of sense. To wrap up, I want to ask you about just, the moment in the market that we're in, which seems to be just like mind blowing. Every day a new drop, like so much hype, like all this frenzy and so much innovation as well. Like the latest big thing with Loot, that was kind of mind blowing how quickly that took off. So want to get your thoughts on this market. Like, is it a bubble? Is it gonna crash? Like, what's sticking around? What's a fad? Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so I do think things are frothy. So there's a lot of people coming in who don't even, don't really know what they're buying. They're just buying things because you can pretty much buy anything and the price is going to be double or triple in a week's time. So I do think there is an element of a bubble. When it's going to pop, you never know. Doesn't mean that these projects aren't worthwhile. So, so in the same way that, in the early, like in 98, and so, like there was everything with .com at the end of their name the stock price would triple or quadruple in a few months. And then a lot of stuff crashed, but Google and Amazon were like one of those things, right? So I think the Googles and the Amazons of NFTs are around now. Also think there's lots of pets.com things that basically just went nowhere. So I think be careful. In general, I recommend that people buy things that they wouldn't mind keeping anyway, especially if they're buying art. So worst case scenario, they end up with something that you love. But I do think there are certain, I've got my favorites. In general, I like on the art side, things that are kind of crypto native that you couldn't really do before. So I think Art Blocks kind of falls into that category. I think Def Beef does a lot of really cool stuff with his music and how they degrade at each time they get transferred. So you need a smart contracting platform to make that art piece work. I think Avid Lines falls into that category. Some of the stuff by the Pulse Squares. So I think there's a few of these projects that are just digitally native, and it's like a new form of artwork that just wouldn't work if the blockchain wasn't there. At the same time, I also think just traditional art, kind of digital art coming onto the blockchain, that's also interesting. But I think, when people write the art history books, it's going to be projects that are genuinely doing something new, where the smart contract is part of the artwork, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. It's paying attention to the medium and innovating together with it. It's been really exciting to see. On our previous podcast episode, John Crane of Super Rare was talking about this new art revolution. The first art revolution of the internet era, and I thought that was a really cool concept. I think we're living it right now.
I completely agree. And it's so in some ways some of these prices seem crazy, but then you also think, well, like what's a Rothko selling for nowadays? $65 million. So, and you could have bought them, when he was painting them for a fraction of that price. So I think there are some of these things that are going to stick around. Do I think, a rock is worth 888 Ether? I'm not sure. But like, I do think, things like autoglyphs, pretty much anything that Lava Labs does is going to stick around. Even that still prices are going to correct, floor prices of $200,000+ on punks, it's not just going to go up. Things are going to go up and down. So just be careful. Yeah.
Totally. All right. And then for NFTfi in the long term, what's kind of your vision? Where would you want it to go in the next decade?
Yeah. So like I said earlier, I think there's these NFTs really are kind of this foundational building block of like a whole new economy almost. So if you think we've now got internet native money in the form of cryptocurrencies, and then we've got internet native property rights in the form of NFTs, right? So, and I think we're kind of building this whole new, I call it a metaverse economy, but it's like a full virtual economy that with all of the components that you need, where everything can happen fully like digitally. And like I said before, that this is all going to build a whole new financial system. And there's new weird things coming that none of us can really think about, in the same way that when the first websites were being built, we weren't thinking about Instagram and Facebook and cryptocurrencies and VR worlds and so on. So I think it's going to be like a whole new world that we're building. And then our role in that is, so we really want to find a way to kind of bring like financial infrastructure to NFTs. So that these projects that are doing experimenting with NFTs, and they want to be able to plug in financial services into them, they can just use us and they don't have to kind of build that themselves, so they can go innovate in other areas. In the same way that things like Stripe allow you to go, you can build whatever you want and sell whatever you want. And there's then a way to receive payment. We want to kind of be that financial infrastructure layer for like this whole new NFT financial world that's being built.
Right. And I mean, if we look into the future, like you said, NFTs will start to split into different categories. In the end, what NFTs are, it's just digital assets or digital property. So in the end, will platforms like NFTfi and others, it looks like they will start to just feel like a bank, just like a platform where people can buy, sell, lend, borrow assets, just like a bank would do that in TradFi.
Exactly. And there's going to be things that a bank just could never do, because, so for example, that previous example of like an NFT paying off the loan itself, you couldn't do that in a bank because the royalty stream used to go somewhere else, and like you can't contractually in the actual agreement do that. So I think there's going to be loads of things that we just couldn't do in a bank, but we will do everything that you could do with a bank. You will be able to do with NFTs and a whole bunch more. And then I also think you're going to start seeing more and more real world assets being represented as NFTs. And then you'll have centralized entities that kind of manage that link between the real world and the decentralized virtual world. But then once you bring this real world asset into this ecosystem, you can then apply all of these same tools to that going forward.
Oh yeah, that's a whole new world that's that still hasn't opened up, like real world assets on the blockchain. I think it's kind of one of the earliest use cases that people thought about, like supply chain. Like I remember one of the first ethereal conferences, sushi on the blockchain, things like that, that I don't think like really have been figured out. But I think they will at some point, right?
Yeah. I think if you look at the like traditional collectibles market, so watches are a great example. So a lot of people buy these watches, stick them in a vault, and then 5 years later sell them, right? So they buy rare watches directly from the manufacturer. So why do they have to take delivery of that asset? What if the manufacturer keeps it in their vaults and you buy an NFT representing your ownership of that asset, and then you can trade it? So that's very close to what these collectible projects are. And then it just gives the actual manufacturers a way to capture part of the secondary market sales on top of those things. So I think it's coming. I think luxury goods, collectibles, all of those kind of things, like they're going to make their way on quite soon. Property is coming, music royalty rights. It's just like the opportunities are endless.
Very well. Everything will be digital. It just makes sense. Okay. I think, we'll have to wrap up now, but such an interesting conversation, Stephen. Thank you so much, and also thank you, Blockchain Summit Latam, for having us, and for those joining. This will also be live on the Defiant podcast in a couple of days. And for those listening to the podcast, thank you guys. Thanks again, Stephen. What a fascinating conversation and moment that we're living in.
Thank you, Camilla. It's really nice chatting to you. And thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.